Hey guys, I'm Mono, and here are 3 games I would recommend to anyone wanting to play a Battlefield game in 2022. Battlefield 2042 was a huge disappointment for anyone that's ever enjoyed the series, so like a lot of people, I've had to look to other games to get that Battlefield experience, or at least something similar to it. Unfortunately, there's nothing that quite matches Battlefield in terms of variety of vehicles or destructibility. Destructible environments specifically are still beyond what most indie developers can accomplish, and even DICE have scaled it way back in the latest Battlefield. However, there are some games that have somewhat realistic armies facing each other with gunplay that's not too punishing, but doesn't play like Call of Duty or Apex Legends either, and that I think any Battlefield fan should at least take a look at. So if you follow this channel, then you probably already know what these games are. They are Hell Let Loose, Isonso, and World War III. They are all fairly different games, which is kind of why I'm including them in this list. World War III is probably the closest one to Battlefield in terms of its actual gameplay. It has modern/futuristic weapons and vehicles, and it reminds me a whole lot of playing maps like Grand Bazaar or Zavod or Zavod from Battlefield 3 and 4. Hell Let Loose is a much more hardcore experience. There's almost no HUD, one-shot kills most of the time, and it's a game that requires a whole lot of communication and team play in order to enjoy properly. If you're old enough to have played Forgotten Hope 1 or 2, which were mods for Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2 respectively, then Hell Let Loose is going to feel like a modernized version of that. Isonso is somewhere in the middle of all of this and is the only game that doesn't actually have any vehicles, but still manages to convey that epic scale with large maps that play like Battlefield's breakthrough mode, and there are some things like commander abilities which call in bombing runs or gas attacks that are very reminiscent to Battlefield 2's commander mode. So I'll go over each of these in detail, show you some gameplay, explain what the games are like to play, and hopefully you'll end up having a blast with one of these games. Alright, let's start with Hell Let Loose. This is available on both PC and new generation consoles, so PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Hell Let Loose is a deceptively fast-paced game. I say this because depending on the level of team play and cooperation, it can devolve into a walking simulator where you just run around for several minutes, not really doing anything, and then you just get randomly shot in the head. That probably doesn't sound like a lot of fun. The problem is, or the solution actually, is that the spawn points in Hell Let Loose are all built by the players. Again, something older players might remember from a Battlefield 2 mod called Project Reality. So unlike Conquest, where if you cap a flag, you get a spawn and maybe some vehicles, in Hell Let Loose, it is all down to the players, and that makes the whole match and the fights more about controlling the map rather than controlling these specific capture points. So the more spawns you have, the more active and dynamic the game is. The less spawns you have, the more boring it really gets. It's a 50v50 game, so lots of players, but maps are really big, so again, player density really comes down to where the spawns are and how many of them are there. The gunplay is really good, though recently they put out an update that is causing some issues with the hitboxes or something, so it doesn't feel as good as it used to, but that's probably gonna get fixed relatively soon. I know that the devs are working on a fix for that, so hopefully they manage to accomplish it. It's a World War II game, which unlike Battlefield 5, actually features iconic battles like Omaha and Utah Beach. All of these maps are recreated as accurately as possible to their real-life counterparts using photographs from airplanes at that time and so on. The game is very much trying to go for a Band of Brothers type of vibe, and it completely nails it. The atmosphere in this game is off the charts. Using your microphone is extremely important, as proximity chat creates spontaneous moments of fun and cooperation with other players that make the game really unique. Matches, however, can last an hour and a half long, so it's not a casual game at all. This is very much I'm gonna sit down, put my headphones on and my microphone and really get into this game. That doesn't mean it's not accessible though. Well, there's actually no tutorial in the game, which is horrible for new players, but hey, maybe there's a channel out there that has a lot of videos on how to actually get good at this game that you should maybe check out and subscribe to. Hello Deuce has provided some of my best gaming experiences ever, and the community can be very helpful and welcoming to new players. On PC at least, there's frequent sales and free weekends, so you can pick it up for around 27 bucks, which is extremely cheap considering the amount of depth that the game has. World War III is probably the closest one to an actual Battlefield game out of these three. It has tanks, APCs, drones like a helicopter or a little car shooting thing, or actual drones. Think Battlefield 4 with smaller maps and the Battlefield 5 style call-in where you cash in your points to get something like a strike or something. In Battlefield 5, that's really limited. In this game, you can call in a vehicle or a drone or a rocket strike or an artillery barrage or a bombing run. There's just a bunch of different things that you can call in, all of which are really fun to do. There are currently two game modes: Tactical Ops, which is a 20v20 Conquest style game mode, and a Team Deathmatch. It's also the only game here that is free to play, but right now it's just sort of unplayable, which, you know, is a bit of a problem. The devs have been having a lot of issues with the servers, so they are constantly shutting them down, then putting them back up, then realizing they still don't work, then shutting them down again, and it's basically been that on a loop since the game went on open beta last Friday or last Thursday or something. I'm working on a video on what's actually going on behind the scenes, because it's really not as simple as some people think, and there's a lot of toxicity surrounding the game right now, and, you know, it really shouldn't be the case because they are trying their best. In any case, this might actually be my favorite game out of these right now. I have 1,700 hours in Hello Deuce, and I absolutely love that game, but when I want to play a faster, shorter game where I don't have to stress as much, World War III is what I like playing. It really does bring me back to those Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 days. I absolutely love the weapon customization, how you can change things that affect recoil or your muzzle flash, or like attach a flashlight that automatically pings enemies. You can equip a grenade launcher. There's just a massive variety of different attachments and a lot of freedom that you have to play around with in terms of how you actually build your loadout to suit your playstyle. The gunplay itself is also extremely satisfying. It rewards proper aim, holding angles, and tactics more than it does just running around Call of Duty style. You can still do that. This is by no means a slow-paced game, but you do have an advantage when you're leaning, when you're peeking around corners and taking it a bit slower. There is no class system, but rather a weight limit system, so stuff like sniper rifles or RPG weigh a lot more than assault rifles, and those weight a lot more than SMGs. And there's also different armor types, so there's a lot of versatility in terms of how you equip yourself and what class archetype you end up building. It's a super solid game with a really rough development history that I think a lot of people will really enjoy once it's actually out and actually playable. And lastly, we have Isonso, which is the newest game from the developers of Verdun and Tannenberg. This is a World War I game set in the Italian Alps, so the map design is actually pretty crazy. There's a lot of verticality in this game and a lot of huge open lines of sight, which can be very hard and very frustrating to learn to play around. If you're not careful, you might just get into a position where you get killed constantly from people that are extremely far away and have a better line of sight to you, and that can get really frustrating, but you have to like sort of play around that. Unlike Battlefield 1, this game actually features World War I weapons, so, you know, no fully automatic SMGs with optical sights or any of that nonsense. Most rifles are one shot to kill, so again, that can also be frustrating for some players. Me coming from Hello Deuce, where that's also the case, I didn't actually have any problems with that. The current available game mode plays a lot like Breakthrough mode with 48 players total. You advance through different areas and stages of the map as you play through the objectives, and the map design really takes that fact into account. Different areas will play completely differently and feature completely different landscapes, so throughout a match you will be faced with multiple different experiences or situations that might favor the attackers or might favor the defenders. There are classes that are limited to a max number of players, and some of the weapons are also limited to a maximum amount, So you can't have everyone running around with a scoped rifle, for example. Most rifles though feel kind of samey, so the actual difference between the classes comes down more to what passive abilities you get and what your secondary equipment is. So for example, you might be able to equip grenades or equip a quick melee weapon or a pistol as your secondary, and your skills or perks can be stuff like having extra zoom when you ADS, or a faster build speed, which mostly affects the fortification system, which is not too dissimilar from what Battlefield 5 was trying to do, but it's actually way better because there's a lot more versatility, so it's actually really good. There are also bots in this game, filling in any empty player slots on a server, and that's probably a way to counteract the low player base that these games tend to have, especially if you want to play it in a region where these smaller games struggle to find a online multiplayer audience. I really like the way this game plays. The bolt action rifles are really satisfying to use, and I think it has a nice mix of tactics and just plain old, aiming skill with your gun. But there are some issues with the game that I hope get resolved. For one, grenade spam is a thing, so sometimes fighting over an objective devolves into who gets luckiest with the grenades, or which team can spam them the most. And there's also some static weapons like the mortar, which can also be very spammy. So yeah, the game released less than a month ago. There's obviously some work that needs to be done in terms of balancing and learning from what the player base is doing. It's $30, so pretty cheap for what games go nowadays. Though, there's not a huge player count, so if you really don't like playing with bots, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but I do recommend it because it is a good game and, support the devs and all that. Alright, that's it. Feel free to ask any questions down in the comment section if there's anything else that you would like to know about these games, and if you have played any of them and you want to comment on your experience to other potential players, then please do so down in the comment section below. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.